Hi. I just finished doing a little snippet from my book, Please Don't Give Me Something More to Talk About. And then it struck me, I haven't really talked about retirement. And, for some people, uh, it's a loss. I mean, many people look forward to it when it's planned. For some people, it's not planned, it just happens for a variety of reasons. But it goes through stages actually, and even if it is planned and something you're looking forward to, and there's some really good videos on YouTube. Some of them are funny, and some of them are, pretty serious, I guess. Just kind of giving people a heads up as to what to expect potentially when they retire. I've been retired personally for, I'm going to say maybe 4 years. And now I write and talk about grief because my husband died in 2019 and I was still working. And I worked for another couple of years, retired in early 22. And I didn't really, I struggled actually with the decision to retire for quite a long time. I was um, concerned that if in retirement, I wouldn't have enough financial resources to live a comfortable, well, a life where at least I have a roof over my head and food in the cupboard, and I can replace a pair of shoes and dress or something as time goes on. And as we get older, we also have more expenses in terms of healthcare. So all these things were on my mind for quite a long time. But ultimately, when my husband died, I really had quite an emotional, I had burnout. I had quite an emotional crisis um, right around the time COVID restrictions lifted and we could go back to work. I mean, I was working at home, so we could go back to the office. And in that sort of emotional, tsunami, really, I decided to take a few weeks off work and just focus on my own uh, emotional well-being. And when I went back to work, I went back in stages. I would go back for maybe a couple of days a week and then add another day and add another day. But actually, as it turned out, that was a great idea, but it ultimately was that I just ended up going back pretty much full time within much shorter time frame than anticipated. But I would sit in meetings and I would think, wow, I just don't have the bandwidth to deal with any of this anymore. These are issues for younger, more energetic people. And much as I love the work, I just, I guess my life had had moved on to other priorities. So ultimately, I decided to retire a few months later. Um, but in my retirement, I was still dealing with the emotional aftermath of my husband's dying and all the other things that I'd been through prior to that. And I didn't, for me, retirement was just peace. It was just being on my own, coping with or managing the emotional aftermath of all of the things I'd been through. I didn't really want people in my life. I isolated in my apartment. I found it a real challenge to get in my car and go get groceries. Um, so for me, retirement was a time to recoup, to really think through what is my life going to be now that I'm a widow? My life partner is gone. I'm here on my own. If I don't do something, it doesn't get done. No, that's not to say I didn't have friends. I did, and they were very helpful. Uh, the workmates that I had slowly, got on with their own lives, and I was, so I did lose a few. supportive people in my life just because that's what happens in life. Everybody has their own issues and priorities. And I found that as I was coming out of all of that, I really needed more supportive community around me, people who'd been dealing with grief, in not my grief necessarily, but similar circumstances, similar events in their life, and just kind of sharing that whole experience. And also, I wanted to learn some things. So now here I am, but all this time on my hands, I'm all by myself. And I do have a little bit of resources. So I got some training in grief because I really wanted to understand what it was I was dealing with. And then ultimately, I decided to write about it. And so I've been posting and writing about this whole complicated grief process now for 3 years. And so I guess what I want to say is that when we retire, it's so important for us to have a purpose in life, to have something to look forward to every day. Doesn't mean to say we work on it every day, but that life develops a rhythm that gives us a sense of happiness, sense of purpose, and a sense of peace. So there are many, many factors that go into creating all of that for ourselves. And, we all have different life experiences. I'm a widow and I'm on my own, and I live in a seniors building, a 55 plus independent living building. So I have lots of other people my own age, or very similar ages and similar circumstances around me. And so, we're a very sociable group. Other people still have family members living in the same space as they are. Some people have, got a little thing in my hair. Other people have, maybe seniors living with them, or maybe adult children who've moved back home. There's a whole variety of circumstances that we each have to face. But, I guess if there's any message that I can pass on, given my own experience and the people that I know, we all need to feel useful. We've been useful all of our lives. We've worked all of our lives. We've raised families. We've cared for the close people in our lives, for our friends. And all of that has to keep going. And even though we don't have a job to get up to and go to, whether that's shift work or regular 9 to 5, whatever it might be, it brings a structure to our life. And when we retire, we lose that structure. And many years ago, I worked as a human resources person in a large organization, and it was not common. I wouldn't say it was common, but it was not unheard of that our retired staffers, within a year or two, they passed on. So, and I don't know the circumstances of their lives. I don't know whether they retired and had purpose, or if they retired and suddenly found themselves with nothing to do. Or maybe they retired because they already had a health circumstance that caused them to slow down, or their immune system to affect their retirement. But anyway, so the purpose of my saying all of this is just to say, if you're retired and not happy, it's really important to have a purpose. I don't really care what that purpose is. Even just crafts, someplace that you can go to on a regular basis. And people in your life who you like and who like you, because that is really important. All right, well, that's all I have to say. So please subscribe, share, like, and if you want to add some comments, I'd love to hear what you have to say too. All right, bye-bye.